right, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Simply Cyber Firesides, where we bring you conversations with the brightest minds in cybersecurity. I'm your host, and today I'm thrilled to welcome Andy Sauer, CEO and founding partner of Sentinel Blue. Andy brings a unique blend of cybersecurity leadership and firsthand, I was not prepared for the lightning. I'm going to have like a seizure back here. Hold on one second. We'll get that sorted out later. I need AV in here, stat, okay? Listen, Andy is the CEO and founder of Sentinel Blue, and he brings a unique blend of cybersecurity leadership and firsthand emergency response experience to our conversation today. Plus, he's also a podcaster, so we're going to get into his creative flows and juices the way that we always do with other content creators in our space, right? So since founding Sentinel Blue in 2020, Andy dedicated himself to helping organizations build cybersecurity maturity and effectively defend their businesses against today's complex threat landscape. I'm talking GRC, people. Whether it's navigating cloud service risks, managing distributed workforces, like the pandemic did, or addressing evolving compliance requirements, Andy serves as a trusted business advisor to business leaders. Now, prior to launching Sentinel Blue in 2020, Andy held key security leadership positions, including cybersecurity manager at Systematic Inc., where he aligned security initiatives with organizational goals, and his technical background includes extensive experience with AD, cloud migrations, and virtualization projects across multiple customer environments. So he's got technical chops. He's got tons of experience. He's running his own company, right? He's rooted in our industry, okay? Now, what makes Andy's perspective particularly valuable is his parallel commitment to public service. So for over 17 years, he's actually served as a paramedic and rescue lieutenant with the Knoxville Volunteer Fire. I probably said Knoxville incorrectly, and he can fix me on that one afterwards. Volunteer Fire and Rescue Department, bringing the same dedication to helping others in crisis to his cybersecurity work. So he's at his core, he wants to help people. And he's also, and this is key for today's conversation, a CMMC registered practitioner, and he also holds what I consider a GRC prestigious cert, the CISM, the Certified Information Security Manager credential. Now, many of you may also know Andy as the host of the Watchers podcast, where he explores cybersecurity topics with industry experts, kind of being on the other side of the mic here, for Simply Cyber Firesides. And today we're going to tap into Andy's expertise on the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, or CMMC as it's regularly called. This is a key Department of Defense initiative aimed at enhancing the cybersecurity posture of the United States Defense Industrial Base. And as a CMMC registered practitioner, Andy brings valuable insights on how contractors handle sensitive, unclassified information and how they can navigate these mandatory cybersecurity requirements and strengthen their security stance within the defense supply chain. What I also want, and why one of many reasons I wanted Andy to come on, is what does the job market look like for GRC professionals once CMMC goes all in or goes whole hog? There's been a couple false starts with CMMC. Andy and I both think this one's about to go forward and get greenlit, or whatever you want to call it. No more yellow caution flags for you F1 people out there, or NASCAR, depending on where you are. Anyways, we're going to have a great conversation today. Andy is absolutely the right person to be talking CMMC. So please, squad members, if you will, I know Andy may not be familiar with this, but drop your Oprah emotes in chat so we can welcome him appropriately. I see Space Tacos and Vince in here. Lara Flores, Chris Cahill, Rhonda Rummerfield, lots of regulars, lots of GRC love in the house. So let's go get Andy and let's have a banger of a conversation. All right, Andy Sauer. Hey, is it Sauer? I should have asked you before.
It is.
Yeah, I figured
Sour like the kraut.
Yeah, welcome to the party, Andy. How are you?
I'm fantastic. That was the most hype intro I've ever had throughout my career. There's so much that I was like, that's right.
I'm available to go on tour with you if you want to just like bring me out as your hype man.
Such a strong opener. Amazing.
I love it. And the Oprah emotes. I do love the Oprah emotes. If you're watching on YouTube, Andy, you can see them everywhere. You get an invitation. So Andy, you are obviously, based on that intro, you're a very busy guy. I know you're also a family man, so I don't know where you find the time to do it all, but we're here to talk CMMC, which has had some false starts, which has had some
Yeah.
things. In your experience, well, before we even get started, Andy, like, some people in chat may not even fully understand what CMMC is. So why don't you give us kind of the nickel tour and introduce us to CMMC so then we can have a platform to have this
Cool.
conversation on top of.
So I think I've already seen in the chat, someone commented, I'm literally working on this right now, which is, hey, hopefully today's going to be really useful to you. CMMC, I'm sure you guys have all heard about it, but there's a lot of confusion. There's definitely a lot of misnomers and myths around it. So the long story short is defense contractors or federal contractors, when they execute a contract with the government, oftentimes the government's going to share confidential data with them to do their contract work. Sometimes that's things like diagrams. Sometimes it's literal software. Imagine the idea of, hey, they want an F-35. You produce a piece that goes into the system that manages the communications on the F-35. That's not necessarily classified, but they also don't want that diagram that you're going to use to make that part freely available to everyone. So they control it, and they call it controlled, unclassified information. In your contract with the government, before they give you that information, they put in about 1,000 contract clauses, things like, hey, you're not going to use slave labor, and you're going to have proper financial practices in place. And they sneak this little one in there of, hey, if you're going to have our controlled unclassified information, you need to secure your information systems to a certain level. They did this back in 2017, 2018 timeframe. And the rule at the time was, you just have to implement the security requirements that we lay out, and you just tell us that you've done it. There was no real check of whether or not you actually did those requirements. And so, as you can imagine, industry kind of just ignored it. Most contractors, there's some studies that were done, and in the slide deck that we share out from this, there's an image from one of the studies that was done where it's like 65% of the contractors basically didn't do it. So,
okay. Well, and let me bring this up right now because
yeah.
Andy actually provided this to me before the show started, and I will make this available to everybody in just a hot minute. But do you know what slide that's on?
Yeah, 9 or 10.
All
The
right, so
why
let's look at this.
is CMMC?
So this is the CMMC juice right here. All right, here we go.
Yeah, so this was a study that a company called Cerebrin did, and they were one of the first to produce this, but a number shortly followed, and then the DoD did their own studies as well. And they basically identified, as you can see in the graphic here, contractors are not implementing the requirements. And the requirements are 800-171. That's the special publication that NIST produces that lists the requirements. And this study basically showed, hey, most people aren't actually doing it. And then when they actually apply scrutiny to really look at whether or not you've truly done it, it was dismally low. And so the DoD started looking at it, and everyone realized, okay, no one's actually doing these requirements to the level required. We're not buying down the risk of losing all this confidential data to our foreign adversaries. So they produced the concept of CMMC. CMMC at its core is just a certification model that goes on top of the pre-existing standard that is NIST 800-171 and adds NIST 800-172. There are 3 levels to it. CMMC level 1 is a very basic, like everyone should have these types of cybersecurity controls, control who has access to your systems, who's authorized to come in, what devices are authorized, very basic level stuff. And you can self-assess that you're doing that properly. CMMC level 2, which is the vast majority of all the conversation you're seeing about CMMC, the vast majority is about this level 2. And this is the full list of requirements from that publication, NIST 800-171. There are 110 requirements, and to meet level 2, you have to implement all 110. And this is what's required for you to handle that controlled unclassified information. So that's the vast majority. Level 3 is some sort of additional control set that goes on top of level 2 for specialized controlled unclassified information. Of the 3, this is the loosest. We have the least amount of understanding because we're not entirely sure what it's going to look like. But in practice, there are 3 levels. But level 2 should be the core of what we're talking about. And as we talk today, I might get a little casual with my wording. When I'm broadly referencing CMMC, I'm generally talking about CMMC level 2.
Okay. And I know some people are telling me that I did not make the link public. So as Andy's talking, I'm slowly getting to the Google Drive where I will make that public. So a couple of things, Andy. Thank you for that primer. And this PDF, this document that is a brief. It's a 25-slide brief that basically is everything that you need to know from a primer perspective of CMMC. Andy's actually developed this and has made it available to our community. So once I get that shared, I'll do it. Andy, two things that jump out right away. Number one, you said level 2 is like what most people are talking about. To me, that oozes, like when you're talking NIST 853, like almost everybody's moderate baseline, right? Because like everybody thinks they have a cute baby until you tell them that cute baby has it like a high baseline, and then you're like, all right, that requires extra security, and they're like, oh no, it's like a moderately busted looking baby. It's just okay, right? So usually we're talking moderate.
Good way to put it.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, one of the things that I find interesting about CMMC, and again, I'm a huge NIST dork, Andy, is that basically all the controls, not all of them, but most of the controls that are in scope are access controls, or at least that was my perception of it.
Yeah. It's a lot
is
of it.
this like, like obviously a full moderate baseline information security program goes across 18 control families. There's probably 300 controls for a moderate baseline, roughly. We do everything from backups and business continuity to integrity checking and all these other things. But none of that's required here. I'm curious, just kind of from a hot take perspective, what do you think? If you were going to implement at Sentinel Blue, your company, Andy, just the controls in 800-171, as a system holder, how do you think that is for cyber risk reduction? Do you think, or what are your thoughts about just 800-171 as a standard?
So if there were a soapbox under me, this is the point at which I would stand on it.
Okay.
All right. So first, 800-171 is a derivative of 853. Generally, the authors of it point back to 853, and what they did was they tailored down the moderate control set for 853 to non-federal systems. The original title of NIST 800-171, the publication, I might butcher it a little bit, but it's generally something like protecting the confidentiality of controlled and classified information in non-federal systems. So that title should tell everyone quite a bit.
Really rolls off the tongue too. Classic
yeah, right.
NIST.
Classic NIST. At its core, it's a data confidentiality model. And as all the, this audience, this well-informed audience, especially those CISMs, like you pointed out, and CISSPs, you'll be familiar with the CIA triad. We don't deal a whole lot with integrity or availability in 800-171. Mm-hmm. It's very confidentiality focused. So to your point, it does have a hefty amount of access control requirements, but there are other major areas where it doesn't do a whole lot, kind of glances over it. So while it does tailor down off 853, it's mostly about that data confidentiality and that data sort of sovereignty model. As to your question, like if I were a system owner or as someone who is a system owner, we're a managed service provider. We have all these systems that hook into client systems that functionally are command and control servers. We're just, we're good guys. I would not rely on 800-171 as the standard for allowing me to sleep at night. And we don't. We look at a number of different other models. I'm a big fan of the NIST CSF as sort of a guiding.
Be still my heart,
That's
Andy.
Right. Yeah. So from one NIST nerd to another, the CSF is kind of my thing. And when I try, when we're writing documents or writing policies and all sorts of stuff, we try to tie everything back to the CSF as much as we can. Mm-hmm. But we do live in the defense world where CMMC level 2, NIST 800-171 is sort of the dominant thing. So we do have to tailor quite a bit to that. But it's not a good standard for establishing cybersecurity in 2025. Mm-hmm. Part of that is because that document traces its roots, and its current iteration that we're required to implement, revision 2, ties its roots to like 2015, 2016. Right? Yep. So as you read through it, and I have some examples in that slide deck, as you read through it, there's a lot of square pegs and round hole problems in there. You can see it drips with bias for what was commonplace in that time, which was big contractors with on-premise, legacy, traditional Active Directory networks and systems. And so the control set is very oriented to addressing those risks. And now in 2025, if you're like Sentinel Blue is entirely cloud-oriented, we have to answer questions about how we secure, network protocols when they're clearly asking about, tell us about your perimeter firewall. And we're like, yeah, we don't have a perimeter firewall because we don't have a facility.
Mm-hmm.
We've shifted everything, our perimeters, our endpoints, and our identities. We don't have a network perimeter anymore. So as a standard, it's frustrating.
It is frustrating. And I don't want to say devil's advocate because I agree with you. It's not sufficient. But, there is a certain balance between trying to push down some type of regulatory standard that can be applied to any business doing business with the U.S. Department of Defense that has controlled unclassified information and have it be meaningful. Because if you try to go shoot the moon, people are just going to be like, no, we're just not. Everybody will just kind of like agree to nod and not do it. So I do think it was needed, right? I mean, it's just, if I was a threat actor, right? If I was running here on the channel or in the community, Andy, we constantly referred to the APT flaming donkey. It doesn't really exist, but we figure if we say it enough, AI might pick it up, and then MITRE might add it to the framework at some point, and just, it'll be like, we did that.
I like that play.
Yeah. So, but dude, if I was a threat actor, not that this is Threat Actor Academy, so don't go getting any ideas, but I'm not going to, if I want to get into the Marine Corps, I'm not going to attack the Marine Corps. I'm going to attack a sub of Booz Allen, right? I'm going to attack Johnny's, 5-person pro services company. And then I'm going to use that to get into Booz, and then Booz into Marine Corps, or even just Johnny into the Marine Corps. So having these controls pushed down to anyone working with them, I totally appreciate it. And I think it is needed. It's kind of like you said, square peg, round hole. Maybe it's not going to really deliver that cyber risk reduction that you think. So
it's a dull instrument, right? And that's, the government often has dull instruments, and they have to solve the problem of Raytheon and their 100,000 employees,
mm-hmm.
but also mom and pop's machine shop in rural Kansas with their 10 employees.
Mm-hmm.
And because of the way all the regulatory constraints are, they can't really apply different standards to different companies excessively. So they're kind of trying to use this dull instrument, this imprecise approach. And yeah, I'm with you. The net positive is there for CMMC. My frustrations with the standard are because I'm a cybersecurity practitioner and something of a perfectionist, and I just see a shorter pathway to a better outcome. All said, I mean, we've been doing this almost a decade, and we're just now getting off the ground. I think there was a much smarter approach we could have taken, but this is better than what we were doing, to say the least.
Yeah, definitely too many cooks in the kitchen for too many years. Is part of the problem, right? The suffering, especially because none of these controls are new. It was literally just taking from the 53. So as we begin to roll on CMMC, I think I think it's October, November 2025 is when it needs to start showing up in RFPs, right?
Yeah. So this is the thing with the DoD. Timelines are variable, and you shouldn't put a whole lot of stock in them. The big understanding, or the big timeline to understand, is as of January, you can now get a CMMC level 2 certification done by the authorized third-party companies that are out there.
Mm-hmm.
For a long time, that couldn't happen. We were waiting for the final rule to go into effect, and that's in effect. Now the program is alive where you can go get a cert, and certs are happening. Sentinel Blue, we got our cert back in January. When it's going to appear in contracts, the DoD has a 3-4 year rolling sort of timeline planned. They're saying, this is the latest I got about a month ago, they're saying very, very few contracts in 2025, the calendar year, will see a certification requirement. Very few, a couple hundred. So this is the DoD is the biggest customer, I think, in the globe, or in the world.
Okay.
They have hundreds of thousands of contracts, so it's a very small number. Then calendar year 2026 is expected to see the first contracts targeted for the CMMC requirements. They won't tell you which contracts because they don't know, but they do speak to their logic and how they're going to select. They're very interested in things like missile defense programs. And if you're on a missile defense contract where you're handling CUI, you will probably be in the early wave of CMMC level 2. Command and control systems, intelligence community. If you're the machine shop that's 4 tiers removed and you guys carve the plate that goes on the assembly that goes in the thing, you might be able to, wait till late 2026, 2027. But there's no set date where it's like, hey, you have a deadline. It's purely a shot in the dark to kind of figure out
Little squishy. So
Yeah.
one thing that I say often, right, and just to preface it a little bit, I started in professional services, working at the Marine Corps headquarters, and it was great. Like professional services companies love young talent because, and not young in age, but young in experience because they're going to make the same amount of money off you, and their margins are higher because they pay you less because you have less experience. So I think working for a contractor, doing DoD work, is a great place to start. Break in, get your experience, and CMMC, because it's going to require so many companies to have cybersecurity. I think it's a phenomenal growth opportunity for people that want to work in GRC. Now, that's what I've been saying. And this is what I kind of alluded to before we came on the air, Andy. What are your thoughts? Do you think that that's complete hogwash? Do you think that that's true? Or what are your thoughts on this space being just a petri dish for GRC entry level people, or entry level, quote unquote?
I think you're pretty dead on in the opportunity and identifying the opportunity. There's economic instability potentially on its way.
Mm-hmm.
But as someone who was born and raised in the DC area, I can tell you we're fairly recession proof, in large part because of the amount of work that depends on the federal government, and the DoD rarely loses its funding, right? So all these defense contractors who are looking to keep their stable contracts through what could be an economic unstable time, they're going to have this requirement, and you're talking tens of thousands of companies, and NIST and DoD and everyone else haven't exactly done industry a favor with the way they've made this a complex, esoteric, highly nuanced program. So there's tons of opportunity for people who do the due diligence, who do their reading, to pull this together and help businesses respond to implementing the requirements. So if you're someone who has that some of those attributes, largely you can read and you can synthesize information and bring it to a business and help them understand how to actually apply it. I think there's an absolute plethora of opportunity for you here.
Yeah, I could see it. I mean, I just think of like SOC 2, as a template, so there'll be work for readiness, right? So people come in and help you get your program up to snuff to be there, and then basically internal audit. You're not required at level 1 and 2, I believe, for self-attestation. Is level 2 still not required? I mean, you're not required for independent attestation. You can do self-attestation on 1 and 2. Is that correct?
So level 1, yes. Level 2, there's a allowance for it, but it's for a very minute sort of subsection of CUI holders. For everyone else, it's broadly not going to be the case where you can self-assess for level 2.
Oh, okay. Well, that's actually great. I think self-attestation is rife with not corruption, but like very, very squishy definitions and very conservative understanding. All right, so that's great. So there's work in readiness, there's work in audit. One thing that's particular about this, Andy, that I'd love for your thoughts on is not anyone can just go audit, right? There are standards that you have to have. Can you talk a little bit about what those standards are?
Oh. Yeah, so there's a couple certifications. So the CMMC model is sort of DoD sponsored, but there's a independent organization that oversees the accreditation body. It's called the Cyber AB. And within their organization, there's another thing called the CAICO, the CAICO, and I can't remember exactly what it stands for. But they put together a certification program. And there's really two major credentials in the assessment pathway. There's the CCP, the CMMC Certified Professional, and then there's the CCA, the CMMC Certified Assessor. Within the CCA, there's what's called a lead CCA. And each CMMC assessment for certification has to have a lead CCA and an assisting CCA who doesn't have to be lead credentialed. I'm a lead CCA. There's a couple hundred of us, I think, right now, and there are requirements that you've had 5 years of management experience, 5 years of information security experience, similar to like the CISSP requirements. And I believe you even have to hold another industry cert, or there's sort of some credit that you can get from that. So that's the assessment pathway. There's the CCP, which the way they wrote the final rule, the CCPs don't add a ton of value to assessment organizations, our requirement to field an assessment as a C3PAO, which we are, our requirement is to put CCAs in front of customers to do the assessment. So the CCP can be a pathway to get your CCA if you wanted to go into assessment, but I don't think you're going to build a career off holding the CCP cert. You just have to get the CCP first for the CCA. There's this.
Okay, yeah, sorry, keep going.
There's also this other structure that you kind of mentioned in my bio, which there's the registered practitioner, and then there's the registered practitioner organization. I think a lot of people who are close to CMMC, like I am, we don't put a lot of stock in that. It turned out to be a lot of a pay to play kind of a scheme. At least that's the sort of the view I hold. You do like 5 hours of slide-based training. It's very minimal, and then they kind of stamp you. Whereas the CCP and the CCA are both almost a week-long courses, and you have to go take a seated exam at a testing center. You really have to know your stuff to get those credentials, whereas the RPO and the RP is kind of like click through, affirm that I took the training.
So the order is CCP, then CCA, or CCA?
Yes.
Okay.
CCP and then CCA.
So I know the lead has like the CISP 5-year requirements. CCP is the first one. Do you know what kind of requirements that has? And can anyone go get it, or do they have to be sponsored, or do they have to be like at an organization that's got some type of like, not clearance, but
yeah, anyone can get it. So CCP, it's there's a training requirement, and you have to go take the exam, and so there's fees associated with it. So it's great if you have an employer pay for it. The only other aspect of it you need to do is you need to pass what's called a Tier 3 investigation. So because the government is credentialing us as assessors or professionals, the government actually goes through DCSA and goes off and does a Tier 3 background check on you. And that's kind of the main problem right now. Why there's only a couple hundred of us at most from the lead CCAs is so many of us are being held up. So many of my peers are being held up by background checks, which are often just, logistical sort of challenges. But from a CCP standpoint, you can jump right in. You pay that fee, you pay that training, go off, you can take the exam, and you can, start supporting assessments, but you can't. Back to my point, like C3PAs, when we're hiring, the CCP is just not a super valuable thing because it's not meeting my requirements. My requirements are CCAs.
Can you get the CCA without the CCP?
No, everyone has to do CCP first.
All right. So,
obnoxious.
Yeah, wicked obnoxious. I mean, this was kind of, without, you don't have to say anything, but just this was part of the reason why they rebooted CMMC. The first, so CMMC, this is 2.0, what we're talking about right now. There was a 1.0 that never got off the ground, and there were some issues. And, without getting into all the dirty laundry, this is kind of along those lines where you need to be a CCA, but you can't be a CCA unless you pay to be a CCP first, right? So in reality, what they should just do is bundle the cost of the CCP into the CCA and just make everybody do CCA, but that's fine.
What really put a poor taste in your mouth too, though, is you have to take human-led training, delivered training, and it has to be by someone who is a licensed training provider. The licensed training provider has to license from a different company licensed training materials. So everyone along the pathway has to pay the accreditation body and the ecosystem a hefty amount. And then to maintain your cert, there's a fee. To be a C3PAO, which is a certifying company, there's hefty fees. So there's a lot of movement of money through it, and that can put a poor taste in your mouth.
Where is all the money going? You know what I mean? Like I get like if I'm licensing the material and then training, I'm charging students because I need to make money because I'm a business and I need to cover my expenses, which is those licensing fees. But then the licensing fee came from like it goes somewhere someone at the top of the hill. I mean, is it a government agency or what?
No, it's an independent. I believe it's a 501c3. And it has to meet the requirements. There's an ISO requirement for accreditation bodies that they have to meet. And so they are highly regulated and controlled. I believe they're expecting a significant overhead because they're talking about being the accreditation body for potentially hundreds of thousands of certifications.
Okay.
So I think they're probably front loading quite a bit. Just when the message from DoD for the last decade has been kind of to industry, you guys suck. Like, you're not protecting our data. You need to do better. Like, that's been the message that we've been getting. And they straddle that with, we're losing the fight. The the adversary is winning. They're getting our data. We need to do better. And this is what we care about. We care about securing our data yesterday. And so you're like, yes, I'm in. Like, let's secure our data. And then the program you deliver is this bureaucratic mess, this nightmare that delivers a poor standard. But you mentioned an earlier version of CMMC, there was a 1.0, but I can tell you there was a 0.6, and before that there was a 0.4.
Okay.
And it was way more ambitious, and it was way more holistic. They were working with Carnegie Mellon, they were working with Johns Hopkins. Like, they pulled this together and they tried to make an actual maturity model, hence the cybersecurity maturity model certification. And in classic sort of government fashion, I think everyone who had optimism and a desire, some ambition to make it something serious, sort of got beaten to submission. They were like, no, you can't change the requirement. We're just going to keep the one that's currently, being required. This is why 10 years later, we have the same standard.
That's so true and so funny. Like, if there's anyone in chat, we have the community is diverse, right? There's people who are CISOs, there's people who are trying to break in. We've got the whole gambit. But as you're saying that, it's just like low key giving me PTSD, Andy. Like, I can remember, like, if you've ever been like optimistic and like super charged up to like go take on a big challenge, I remember I started at, I don't want to name it, but I started at a rather large organization and I was given a lot of authority to build out their cyber program. And there was like an old grizzled guy there. And I was like, oh, like I'm going to do this. Like, I'm going to get a system security plan and do all these things. And he's like, oh, he like literally laughed in my face. I'm like, dude, you just don't know what you've been doing. Like, with all due respect, like I'm fresh blood. I got this. And like 6 months later, he like came to me. He's like, how's that SSP coming along? Huh? And I'm like, shut up. It's not fair. Like, just like, I'm just like been slapped and beaten every day for no reason. So if you've lived that life, drop a preach in chat, because it doesn't go away. And it's so true, especially large organizations. Oh, you're on mute, Andy, or I'm on mute. I can't hear you. Let me know, chat, if you can hear me or you can hear Andy. Let me see. Do I have sound effects? Oh, I've got sound effects for days. All right. Hold on one second. Chat, we're going to ask you for a little bit of help right now. Let me know if you can hear me. Oh, I can hear you now, Andy.
All right. Interesting. Maybe Windows is updating. I got that sound in my earbuds, the da-dum, like something got disconnected, and hey, here we are again.
Yeah, your audio's out of sync with your mouth, but that's fine. I don't care. The audience, we're more concerned about what you have to say than anything else. Also, really quickly, Priceless Pancakes is feeling seen right now. Preach, all caps. Dude, we have a couple questions in chat for you, Andy. Some quick hitters here. Quick hitter from Priceless Pancake. On level 2 CMMC, they are under the impression it's self-attest yearly, audited every 3. Is that what the system is?
Yep. So once you do your level 2 certification with a C3PAO, they're going to submit your package. There's a big government system, and it will feed into that, and you'll get your cert. Then every year following that, you have to go into the government system and click a button as what's called the affirming official at your company clicks the button that says, yep, we're still doing the things that we were assessed as doing.
Yeah. So, I mean, for those who are longtime NISTs or government, DC Beltway, it's basically ripped off 837 RMF, 6-phase cycle. It's an ATO, which you do every 3 years, and you do annual, typically you do annual touches of critical controls. So again, yet another thing that is CMMC that wasn't new. Like, what? Like, there's no reason that this needed to take 10 years. I don't know why I'm getting so mad about that, Andy, but like I am lit up about it.
Well, so can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
These tacos, I want to answer your question definitely, but I love this hypothetical because I sometimes get criticized for my criticism as someone who's deeply in the ecosystem. I get it. I kind of get there's a hypocritical nature to that. But let's rewind 10 years. And I tell you, you are now going to be the CISO, the responsible CISO for the defense industry. And I need you to build a program that's going to deal with the fact that our defense contracting base is bleeding data excessively through things like ransomware and APT attacks and whatnot. What would you like to do in response to staunch as much of that bleeding as quickly as you can to prevent the damage? And let me premise it too. let me offer you what has been done. And let
Okay.
me offer you the option to take an alternative path. Do you want to do what has been done, or are you interested in an alternative path?
Well, I mean, an alternative path would be nice because what has been done is clearly not effective or working. Um, so, I mean, that's my thing. I think honestly, I don't know if this is going to answer your question, but I think part of it is that, especially 10 years ago, uh, everybody thought technical controls was like that was it. That's all you had. A lot of people didn't put a lot of concern into process control, and then human control was like literally 10 like for anyone. Again, here's another I guess we should have called this the PTSD, not the CMMC episode. If anyone has worked with the federal government, you have absolutely taken this ridiculous clip art looking training. Do you know the training that was like, it was like an animated video where you click through and like the person's like at the door and they're like, "Hi, I'm a delivery guy. Please let me in." Or like, "Hi, do you know what I'm talking about, that training?"
Yeah.
It's so bad.
Would you believe some of that's still around?
No, I don't want to. But my thing is like to me, again, maybe I'm biased because I'm a GRC geek, but like I think the human awareness side and the human control side was so just dismissed as an annual touch and don't worry about it. But really, a lot of risk comes from that area, right? Like misconfigurations by engineers, crappy credentials, by end users, right? Like these, you don't need a 0-day elite level hacksaw. You just log in as them.
Yeah. So my point when I talk about this, when I get on this particular soapbox, the way we bleed data is primarily through about 3 different attack vectors, right? And a lot of what the challenge has been to get industry to take action is you gave them a list of 110 requirements and said, we hold these requirements to be equal amongst each other, that if you do 109 of them, including multi-factor authentication and good endpoint protection and change control, but you forget this little minor esoteric thing that really doesn't address a significant risk, you fail. Right? And so you've made this monolithic, scary thing of 110 things that are going to completely change how you have to do business. So everyone dragged their feet. Instead, if we had been like, here's the 5 big ones, like turn on MFA, patch your systems, have some sort of incident response plan ready. Now let's go assess that that's happening and make sure the defense industrial base is doing that. Imagine if we started that 10 years ago, instead of now where we have maybe 30 companies who are finally certified, maybe 40, something around that range, who are finally certified. I just think we tried to do this program that got everything in it instead of focusing on like what I think is a big concept in GRC. Like, let's focus on what our real risk is today, and let's address those. And hey, if we come back and we can do FIPS validated cryptography, amazing. But let's just start with cryptography. Like, let's just start doing decent modern encryption. Yeah.
Like what's Tempest? What I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this Tempest control. Like, but yeah, no, 100% with Andy on this one. And just for folks who are trying to look for a metaphor here to kind of relate to that, or an analogy. Think about the way software used to be developed, right? It was very monolithic, waterfall techniques. And now it's agile and it's just like constantly new feature. Every time you boot up like one of these apps like Discord or Telegram or Signal or something like that, it's like, oh, you got an update. You got to patch it. Same thing. It's much more agile, right? And to Andy's point, every time I see a data breach that involves like a credential, I'm like, why didn't you have MFA? Like it's 2025. Dude. Okay, now we're just kicking it. Okay,
comes your soapbox. Let's go.
Do you remember? It was like 6 months ago. 23andMe got hacked, and they didn't really get hacked. Someone just did a credential stuffing with a data breach list, and 23andMe came out and like blamed their customers for having crappy passwords. They're like, we didn't really get hacked. Our customers just have crap passwords, and I'm like. None of them obviously had MFA, you idiot. So like to me, I get MFA adds friction, and we can't have our customers having friction. But like, it's so. I wish we just normalized it.
Yeah, no, you like to see some industry leadership. Unfortunately, a lot of the industry leadership of companies forcing the issue are in the IT bubble.
Yeah.
And then some of the most scary accounts you have are the ones who are the slowest. Like every bank account I've ever logged into is still sending me text messages. Like no FIDO key, let alone something more secure like an OTP. Nope, still text messages is the only option. These industries are so slow to move. And, I guess there's some social criticism of what the consumers want and the lack of information security awareness we broadly have as a population. But yeah, it's 2025.
Yeah. Actually, I mean, it makes me think too, like, I mean, for better or worse, again, I don't want this to happen to anyone, but like, threat actors are, these scam call centers, these click fix pop-ups, your computer's been infected, call this number. Like this is happening to average citizens, right? Like a lot of older people, like my good friend's parents got hit for $5,000. So when when you get burned yourself, you realize you don't want to touch a stove anymore. So unfortunately, I do think one of the benefits of all of this roughshod being ran over regular people is that they're going to ask, how do I stop this from happening again? And hopefully MFA, gets normalized. Also, it's too bad. Like password vaults would go a long way, but the onboarding of those is so problematic. I didn't mean to derail your
No.
here, Andy. It's a passion topic for me.
Same. Yeah. So on my podcast, which I don't mean to plug necessarily, but we tackle these issues in information security. We're passionate people, and there's so many challenges, and that can make you come off as a pessimist, right? It can make you come across as someone who's just critical and a pessimist, and you're not having optimism about the future. And I'm truly optimistic. Like, I get it. I think we're doing a lot of the right stuff. I see things we could be doing better. We don't have to have as much pain and as much struggle as we sign ourselves up for. That's where it's coming from with me. Like I'm a big fan of the work that we're doing. And I think communities like this give me a lot of hope. There are passionate people. We are trying to solve problems. And I can tell you from the government side, I interact with a ton of people in the government, and they are passionate, mission-driven people, just like we are. Like they care. And we come together on occasion, industry and government, and we have phenomenal conversations where both sides are reasonable. And we're all about trying to figure out how to, solve these problems. There's a lot of frustration and challenge to get there, and a lot of it has to do with technology being this insanely fast-moving industry. The market is always moving. The workforce is not as developed as we'd like it to be to serve in the roles that we need people in. So, it's a great field to be in because it's interesting.
Oh, I love InfoSec. So you mentioned your podcast. This is Andy's podcast right here, The Watchers. What is it that you talk about on this podcast?
So we talk about national security and cybersecurity. We have a lot of industry folks. Like our first episode was with the former acting director of the FBI, Andrew McCabe, who took over after James Comey. And it's
not a bad first guest.
No, that was an awesome first guest. It was super cool to do that. But the concept is like long form. These are 90 to 120 minute in studio, low edit episodes where we're having deep conversation, hearing about their background, why they got into cybersecurity. Ron Gould, the founder of Nessus, is one of those shorts right there. So I like to get their story and what drives them, what interests them, and then what their mind is chewing on, especially with all the emerging technology. So we've had some super cool people on. Big fan of the opportunity I get to do, sitting in a room with some of these really
this is great, dude. Super pro looking studio too. Like I'm looking around back here, kind of asking myself, what am I doing here? Like,
well, we rent that one. Let me assure you, this is the digs in which I normally operate.
Well, it's funny. It is inspiring. I'm like, just as a quick aside, like I'm in the middle. This is that table, and that's one of the two. Like I'm in the middle of trying to recreate this. But this is very cool. I dropped a link to everybody to the YouTube channel for the podcast. I dropped a link there. You're gonna get another sub right here. He's got over 1,000 subs on the channel, a bunch of content, looks good. So if you're interested in national security and clearly somebody who's wicked passionate about infosec and cybersecurity, and especially kind of in the DC Beltway area. Andy's absolutely the guy to listen to about that.
If I could plug real quick, if you guys do want to check out the podcast, I mentioned the first episode, Andrew McCabe, great episode. The third episode is with a guy named Robert Potter, who's been in Ukraine for the last several years, supporting their defense against the Russian cyber attacks.
Okay.
Phenomenally interesting episode about what they're doing to defend cyberspace, which there's a lot of conflict happening there. And then I think my personal favorite, which maybe I shouldn't do as a host, is the fifth episode with a gentleman named Robert Disney, who was a pararescue jumper in the Air Force and tells his whole combat story and now has transitioned out of the military into AI and what he's been doing. Super cool episodes, and that one's absolutely riveting. The man was shot through the face and tells you all about it.
Oh my God. Okay.
Yeah, phenomenal episode. And he does a lot of talking. I just do a lot of listening because I was flabbergasted at his story. I was just like, this is incredible.
Dang. So, okay. Episode 5. All right, guys. So you got a bit of a playlist here lined up for you from Andy on his Watchers podcast. And, dude, that's sick. Thanks for giving us a couple, cherry picked episodes to sample to see if Watchers is,
sure.
Kind of your speed, basically. Who doesn't want to throw a podcast on and while you're driving or working out or something?
Totally.
So there were a couple other questions. Space Tacos had one earlier. She just wanted to know, going back to CMMC, what if you just say F it? Yeah, we're good. We're good.
Yeah.
What happens?
I wouldn't recommend it. And someone earlier in the chat called out the news story that's been making waves in this sort of niche community. The government did just settle with the company, a small company, for several $1 million under what's called the False Claims Act. The big scary behind, there's two big sticks being wielded at contractors to do this. One is criminal False Claims Act, where you could potentially find yourself in jail. Unlikely, more likely you're going to be fined in a significant way. You're going to be, your company's going to be damaged. That's under the False Claims Act. The other big stick being wielded is you're going to get kicked off your contract. If you don't have the cert in hand at some point, when the contract says you need to have a cert in hand by this time, part of what CMMC is doing is creating the literal cert. And there's a government system that they're going to be able to go look up your cage code, your organization identifier, and see if you've been certified. And if you're not, off contract. Somewhere in that, there's also, most of the contracting base are subcontractors who work for the big primes. Mm-hmm. The big primes, they're required to validate that you're doing what you should be doing. And I've already seen big primes start kicking people off contract. They're not doing it prolifically. There's not a ton of that happening. But I've been party to conversations where subs are not showing enough seriousness with, their approach to actually getting certified, that they're saying, yeah, we don't think you guys are going to be responsible handlers of the data. You're a liability. You're out until you come to us with a story and proof that you're making the right steps happen.
That's awesome. It's always nice, well, quote unquote nice. It's always interesting when you have, I guess, community self-policing, for lack of a better term, where, it's no, we're not joking around here. We are going to do this. This isn't lip service. And if you're not down with it, you can get off. So whether it's the government kicking you off contract or a prime kicking you off as a sub, there will be consequences. And at the end of the day, I say this, I actually have a sounder for it, right?
Straight cash, homie.
That's Randy Moss. Say it straight. It's all about money, right? A finger wag is a finger wag, which is why, self-attestations had its problems. But if you're not going to make money, that's what we're doing here, right? You can't pay payroll. You can't have a business if you're not generating revenue. So that is a big stick to wield. But I agree with you. The prison one, I think that's more for egregious, yes, fraudulent negligence. I mean, even just really quick, guys, as an example, it's not 1-to-1, but if you look at HIPAA, HIPAA for a long time was oh, you got to do everything that we say or else, it'll be bad. And then if you've spent a minute in healthcare, people aren't really achieving full HIPAA compliance. And then when they do get hit, if they show that they were trying, it's just there's no financial fees.
Yeah.
Like HHS-OCR almost never gives a financial penalty unless there is some type of like egregious negligence, or it's like 3 times in 1 year and it's like clear you're not taking it seriously. So yeah, we'll see.
There's a lot of wisdom in that sort of through line there. Like taking responsible and reasonable action, that's generally going to result in forgiveness a lot more, right?
Mm-hmm.
The ecosystem is not designed to be all punishment. There are a lot of reasonable human beings involved. And one of the things I put in that brief, because I want people to have some actionable intelligence toward the end there, we point out all the challenges with the program. It's esoteric. You need all these credentials. There's all this stuff you have to understand. And even still, I'm in my 8th year, in terms of professionally supporting just these 110 requirements, and we still debate what they mean. You're never going to get clarity. You're never going to get full clarity. So the question is like, what do I do? What do I do in response to that? And my guidance is always reason must prevail in these things. If you can demonstrate you made a reasonable judgment, you sat down, you thought it through, you used logic, you're going to be very defensible. I've now supported 4 successful CMMC level 2 assessments. So we have 4 companies that we've seen certified that we supported. Each one of them, there are things that come up where the assessors don't clearly understand what you were going for. And when you sit there and explain it, and you explain, well, this is the risk calculation we made. This is why we settled on allowing this level of access into this system, because it's only 5 people, it's tightly controlled, it's monitored by our SOC. We explained the logic and why we got there, and they're like, great, that's amazing, perfect, nailed it. Right, so reason has to prevail, but you have to do the thinking. You can't just, throw whatever at it.
Right, 100%. I that's another thing I say. I always say it from the opposite perspective. I always tell people, because I train people to be GRC pros. Like I say, listen, if you're going to sit down for an audit, like especially a NIST-based audit, and you don't know what the control, like you can read, like obviously it's written in English, you can read it out loud, but if you don't understand what it is actually asking, you're going to look like a complete dolt to the person on the other side of the table. And they're going to know it, because I guarantee you the first question out of their mouth is going to be, what do you mean by that? And if you can't answer that question intelligently, you've lost all credibility. Because in whatever, choose control here. Like MFA is an easy control for people to wrap their head around, but there's other controls that can be achieved in very different ways and still have the essence of what the control is trying to.
I got an example for you.
Yeah.
Can you pull up the slide deck?
Yeah.
There's a couple examples, because one of the things I kind of highlight is some of the challenges with it. If you go to
Hold on one second. Yeah, I got it. What slide?
Slide 15.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the requirements reads, employ the principle of least privilege, including for specific security functions and privilege accounts. Cool. Prove that. Prove you've employed across your systems and your data and all the people involved that you employ the principle of least privilege. Well, how do you demonstrate that? Where do you draw the line? How far down do you go? That's not laid out clearly for you. This is not set the toggle to 10-minute inactivity timeout. It's employ a principle, a core principle of information security, and be prepared for that to hold up to scrutiny.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. This is a phenomenal example. Because this goes across all 3 dimensions of people, process, and technology, right? Because you can have PAM, but then, are you auditing PAM? Is when you hire someone or when they switch roles, are you reviewing their access? I always complain about that, that ever-present challenge of like, Nick Barker just started today. Give him the same, he's helping Andy out. Give him Andy's role. And like, Andy, you're the CEO of the company. They're like, yeah, he's helping me, but I don't think he needs access to the nuclear launch codes yet. Although Nick Barker would like that. So this is a great example. I love it. And 100% with you. So yeah.
What you'll love is, like, I think the next example after that is where sometimes it's very vague. Then there's other times where it's like very verbose. If you go down, think to the next example. So 313.11 is, it talks about use FIPS validated cryptography, but then like the assessment objective is determine if they're using it, which is like super vague. Like, okay, again, where do we Do we do it at the application, at the operating system? Is it okay if we operate our hardware in FIPS mode, or do I have to have the algorithm? Like there's questions. And again, I'm telling you, we're 8 years that I've been doing this full time. There's no clear line. So you have to make good judgment calls, in sort of a game time decision. You just got to make a reasonable, smart decision, which means you have to be well informed. You have to be prepared to demonstrate that you were well informed when you made the decisions you made.
Yeah. Well, and another like classic example, I guess now we're just like, hitting the ball, volleying back and forth, like MFA, right? You got to have MFA. Like, okay, all of our AD accounts and, when they log in remotely or VPN, MFA, but like, no one's logging into a network switch and there's MFA.
Yeah.
Right. So like, does MFA just not count there? Like,
right.
What do we talk? That doesn't say that.
It's sort of like this unwritten, there's a certain level where you're like, well, certainly they didn't mean that.
Yeah, exactly. But then you got everybody's like friggin' like interpretation and stuff. It's, that's why it's an art form, not a science. If it was a science, they would have just made a tool that does it. And that's why people were like, what's your favorite GRC tool? I'm like, it's Excel. Like,
Yeah. Well, in GRC professionals and people that are looking to get into GRC, so much of the value that we get out of our GRC folks, and that's a lot of the role I play nowadays. I'm pretty off, hands off keyboard at this point, but I still do some support of assessments and whatnot. And it's about crafting the narrative. Mm-hmm. It's explaining, I understand enough of the technical, and it's wrapping that around and explaining our logic, what the risks that we addressed were. So that's how we got to the solution that we put in place, and then being able to communicate it. Those are some of the hardest skills to come by in cybersecurity. And when I find someone with that ability to pull that together, to synthesize information like that, if we don't have a job open to fill them, I'm like, open a job, find something, get that talent in, because that is very hard to find.
Yes, very hard. It's communication and analysis really are critical skills, especially communication. AB had a question. I haven't run into this too much in my federal experience. I was working on like new development systems. ICS/OT and legacy equipment. Like, what do you do with that when you run into that with CMMC? Like, can you tailor out?
Yeah. So this is the thing. There's in the CMMC model, there's something of an allowance for this. But if you just look, it goes back to the standard and some of the criticism I have of the standard. The standard is written to protect the confidentiality of data on non-federal information systems. OT and ICS are largely just like ignored. It's a massive blind spot. And the DoD, when they've been asked about this, they've kind of said, yeah, we know, we're going to come up with something special to deal with OT. But there's basically an allowance for, hey, if you've unsupported stuff, like you got to isolate it. You don't want it on the same information system networks and whatnot. But that's about it.
Interesting. And
it's very bare bones.
Does it, I guess with legacy equipment, so, you could have, whatever, like one of these classic examples of like a Windows XP machine that has like a Microsoft Access app that someone built that left the company, and you're like, I don't know how it works, but we got to keep it. Does it allow for tailoring and like can you could you put a firewall in front of this system and kind of network segment it, or is it like just not allowed?
There's some leeway in here. Per the rule, sometimes these things aren't fully defined. So there's like enduring exceptions kind of stuff where it's, hey, we have a critical piece of manufacturing equipment. It's $3 million to replace it. It runs on Windows 95 and it's fine. It operates. Like, we're not paying $3 million just to use Windows 11.
So we can win a $300,000 contract.
Exactly. So there are mechanisms with which you can explain, like, hey, that's isolated. We put in alternative safeguards there. There's an allowance for that. A lot of this stuff is still being defined, and people are testing what the envelope, how far it can be pushed. But at the end of the day, one of my big themes and takeaways in CMMC and some of the criticism around is, at the end of the day, generals want the equipment that they need in the field to conduct their combat operations and project the power they want to project. If you happen to get Windows 11 for your $3 million manufacturing equipment, it's going to stop them from fielding the equipment. They're going to find a way to make sure that you can do what you need to do. They'll have, reason has to prevail. We shouldn't decommission, a missile system because the small machine shop that cuts the fin that goes on the assembly doesn't want to pay $3 million to do their 2,500 parts or whatever,
100%. So it's not cut and dry. There is some like
Yeah.
reason behind it. But again, it's hundreds of thousands of businesses that are going to be subjected to this. So they had to make it flexible enough to work for all of those. Andy, we're getting close to time. I do want to spend a quick minute. We're talking with Andy Sauer. We've been talking CMMC for the last hour. If you showed up late, I know a couple people did. I hope everything's good in your world. We covered CMMC extensively, what it is, where it's going, how you get involved with it, how it works for a career. Andy is the CEO of Sentinel Blue, which is this company right here. Andy, you gave me the impression that you're an MSP, but what's Sentinel Blue?
Yeah, so we're an MSP, MSSP. We're a company that supports pretty much exclusively defense and federal contractors, generally in the small, medium business segment, and they can't field their own capabilities. So we have a SOC, we have an IT management service, a help desk, vCIO, vCISO, all those typical capabilities, blue team as a service type stuff, vulnerability management, that they functionally outsource to us. And we come in as a trusted partner, integrate with them, and help them build up to things like CMMC Level 2 certification.
Awesome. He's also the host of the podcast, The Watchers, which we talked a little bit about earlier. What's the frequency of The Watchers?
We generally drop 2 episodes a month. Some months go about 1 episode. Sometimes it's hard to get people to show up anywhere anymore, everyone's remote, and we're trying to keep it as strictly as we can to studio. So last year, I think we dropped 14 episodes, and then we've got 6 so far this year. So somewhere in the cadence.
There you go. So definitely worth checking out. It's a video. I mean, you can listen to the audio, but I don't see why you would when Andy's rented out this sick looking studio to have these cool looking interviews. So go check that out. That's definitely good. Andy, before we boogie out of here, final thoughts, or, you got some upcoming projects you want people to know about, like, kind of an opportunity to have the floor.
Yeah, well, listen, I'm passionate about, and hopefully that sort of shines through. You mentioned in the intro, one of the big parts of my life that I love to tie my professional work back to is I'm also a paramedic. I talk about it a lot on the podcast, and I think people who listen to the episodes get kind of tired of it, but it's so similar what we're trying to do in paramedicine and emergency medicine to what we're trying to do in cybersecurity. There's a lot of principles, a lot of like, stay calm, figure out what's going on, address the big risks, staunch the bleeding. There's a reason I communicate in a lot of those terms, because that's what I was doing before I really got deep in information security. But you kind of mentioned the passion that I have, the interest in helping. That's genuine. There's, of course, when you're making public appearances and whatnot, there's some self-serving nature of it, and I really appreciate plugging the podcast and all that sort of stuff. But I'm mainly interested in being part of the community and sharing the knowledge that I've amassed, because I benefit from all the knowledge you all share. And I think as a community, as an ecosystem, as an industry, having good faith actors like Jerry, who platform people and get a message and communicate, is super important, and a big source of the optimism that I talked about earlier. I love participating in this way, and I will, tell everyone, consider me an open book resource. You can find me on LinkedIn, shoot me a message. If you have questions about, hey, my company needs to do CMMC, what should I do? Or how did you guys implement MFA? I try to answer that as easily as I can without, forcing it into like a sales pipeline or anything. I truly want to, be as helpful as I can.
Thank you. And you can see here, I'll bring it up. This is Andy's LinkedIn page. I'll drop here. Let me drop a link to it really quickly. Andy Sauer -SB. And that is in there. So if you want to connect with Andy, say hello. Definitely a great guy. And I don't typically say this on the show, but just because Andy kind of touched on it, the sharing of Sentinel Blue, the sharing of the Watchers podcast, Andy didn't ask me to do that. I wanted to do that because I think it's fantastic. Obviously, Andy, you're a really interesting person. You're community focused and want to share knowledge. So all of your kind of projects and efforts and initiatives, that's why I want people to know about them, because I want them to get as much Andy as they can consume, at their leisure, if you will, right?
Yeah, it can be a little too much if you take it in too quick of a dose. But listen, I truly appreciate it. I've loved the chat that I've seen going on on the side. There seems to be some very well educated and informed people in CMMC as well. So awesome of you guys to join, and it's been a pleasure being on. I truly appreciate the opportunity.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I love it. And yeah, we do have a great community. A lot of smart, engaged practitioners in there looking to level up and share information. So
I'll tell you, as not a morning person, the morning brief, the energy when I get to join that, I'm like, okay, now I'm wide awake because that is fast moving.
oh, cool.
You start with the energy, but like the chat too, they're moving a million steps a minute, and I'm trying to like join in and answer questions and join the conversation. It's very energizing.
Awesome. Yeah. If you're in the morning brief at any point, Andy, say hello. And, team, I'll just ask you, because sometimes I can't watch the chat because I'm producing and hosting and doing some other stuff. But if you see Andy in chat on the Daily Cyber Threat Brief, definitely call it out and let me know, and we'll give him a big shout out. We'll play some sound effects and stuff like that. We'll give you the Ric Flair just to let you know.
All right.
All right, guys. Hey, we're going to wrap. I want to say thank you very much to all of you Simply Cyber community members for showing up, asking great questions, engaging with each other, and taking some away. And of course, I want to say thank you to Andy. Andy, thanks for taking time. Time is an incredibly valuable asset. I'm very well aware of that. With a family, with a business, with work, I know it's hard to carve an hour out. So thank you for coming on to the show, talking CMMC, having everybody kind of level up their skill and knowledge around that, space that's actually going to become quite relevant here in, the not too distant future. So thank you. Absolutely very much on behalf of myself and all of Simply Cyber.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Heck yeah. All right, y'all. We will see you tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. Eastern time for the Daily Cyber Threat Brief. Until next time, I'm Jerry. He's Andy. Take care.